Nero Wolfe and the Memory of Snow. It was a Monday morning in late February when the past arrived frozen in silver and gelatin, and it brought questions that even Loyal couldn't answer with his steady brown eyes. 3 months had passed since the Blackwood case, since we'd driven upstate to Hunter's Rest cabin, since Wolfe had solved Jonathan Blackwood's murder, since Loyal had officially become the 6th member of our canine household. November seemed a lifetime ago now, though the Pitbull's brass collar tag still hung on a hook in the front hall, a memento of the 200-mile journey that had brought him to our door. I was in the office reconciling our bank statements. Wolfe insists on knowing the exact position of our finances down to the penny, though he affects indifference to money when Fritz entered carrying the morning mail on his silver tray. Through the bulletproof windows, grey light struggled through heavy clouds that promised snow. February in Manhattan is nobody's favorite month. "The mail, Archie," Fritz said, setting the tray on my desk, including a package from New Hampshire. No return address, but the postal clerk wrote photographs, "Do not bend," across the envelope. The 6 dogs were arranged in their customary positions. Caesar, the Alpha Doberman, lay near Wolfe's desk where Wolfe sat reading a treatise on alpine orchids. Mars, the enforcer, was stationed by the safe. Apollo, the scout, occupied his window post. Minerva, the strategist, rested near the fireplace. Diana, the swift one, had claimed the red leather chair, and Loyal, our brick-red Pitbull with the white chest blaze and notched ear, lay on the Persian rug between my desk and the hall door, his favorite spot since joining us. I examined the envelope. It was manila, oversized, reinforced with cardboard, and bore a postmark from a town called Frost Hollow, New Hampshire, dated 3 days ago. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural. "Anything interesting?" Wolfe asked without looking up from his book. "Unknown sender from New Hampshire. Photographs." "Then open it. If it contains something objectionable, incinerate it." I slit the envelope carefully and extracted its contents. 8 glossy black and white photographs, each 8 by 10 professionally developed, and a note on cream-colored stationery. "Mr. Wolfe, these photographs were taken by my sister, Elena Rostov, 3 years ago, while she was documenting wildlife in the White Mountains. She died 10 days ago, in what police are calling an accident. I believe she was murdered. I found these hidden in her darkroom. The final photograph will explain why I'm contacting you. Please help. Dimmitri Rostov, Frost Hollow, NH." I studied the photographs one by one. The first showed a forest trail in winter, deep snow, bare trees, stark beauty. The second captured a frozen stream, ice formations creating natural sculptures. The third, a clearing where someone had been digging, dark earth exposed against white snow, tire tracks visible. The fourth, a closer shot of the excavation, revealing what looked like industrial barrels partially buried. The fifth, a truck in the background, its company logo visible, Cascade Industries, Chemical Solutions. The sixth, 2 men loading barrels onto the truck, their faces clear despite the distance. The seventh, the same clearing, but taken from a different angle, showing more barrels and what appeared to be a concealed access road. And the eighth, I felt my breath catch. In the 8th photograph, positioned at the edge of the frame, almost hidden behind a snow-covered boulder, was a dog, a brick-red Pitbull with a distinctive white chest blaze, watching the scene with alert attention. The angle, the lighting, the posture, it was unmistakably Loyal, though he looked younger, leaner, his coat duller than it was now. "Sir," I said quietly, "you need to see this." Wolfe sighed, the martyred sound of a man whose reading is being interrupted, and held out his hand. I gave him the photographs and the note. He examined them in silence, his eyes narrowing when he reached the final image. Loyal had lifted his head. He was staring at the photographs in Wolfe's hands with focused intensity, a low whine building in his throat. "The animal recognizes something," Wolfe observed. I walked to Loyal and knelt beside him, holding out the 8th photograph. His reaction was immediate and visceral. He lunged forward, pressing his nose to the image, whining louder now, his whole body trembling. "He remembers," I said. "Whatever this is, he was there." Wolfe set down the photographs and looked at Loyal with the expression he reserves for particularly complex problems. 3 years ago, which would place this approximately 6 months before Jonathan Blackwood found him near Crooked Creek, Where was the dog before Blackwood? We never knew. Blackwood's letter said he found Loyal injured in the woods. No collar, no identification. He assumed the dog had been abandoned or gone feral. Evidently not. This photograph suggests a different history. Wolfe picked up the image of the two men loading barrels. Illegal dumping of chemical waste. A photographer who documented it. A dog who witnessed it. And 3 years later, the photographer is dead under suspicious circumstances. And someone sent us the evidence. Someone who knew that I would recognize the significance of the dog, which means someone who knows about the Blackwood case and our acquisition of Loyal. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie, telephone this Dimmitri Rostov. I wish to speak with him immediately. The number was included on the note. I dialed, and after 4 rings, a man answered with a heavy Russian accent. Yes? Mr. Rostov, this is Archie Goodwin calling from Nero Wolfe's office in New York. We received your package this morning. Thank God. You'll help? Mr. Wolfe would like to speak with you. One moment. I put him on speaker. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Mr. Rostov, explain your sister's death and why you believe it was murder. The voice that came through was thick with grief and anger. Elena was wildlife photographer, very experienced, very careful. She lived in Frost Hollow, worked in White Mountains documenting animals, ecosystems. 10 days ago, she was found at bottom of ravine near Mount Carver, a place called Devil's Gorge. Police say she fell while hiking, but this is impossible. Why impossible? Because Elena knew those mountains like her own face. Because she was not hiking, she was being followed. 3 days before she died, she called me scared. Said she'd found old photographs from 3 years ago, dangerous photographs. Said someone had broken into her darkroom, went through her files. She was going to police the next day, but she never made it. Did she tell you what the photographs showed? Chemical dumping. She'd been photographing in protected watershed area, stumbled on illegal operation. She took photos, but was afraid to report the men saw her, threatened her. She said they'd kill her dog if she talked. So she hid the negatives and moved on, tried to forget. But 3 weeks ago, someone contacted her, anonymous call saying they knew what she'd seen, knew she had evidence, started demanding she turn over negatives or they'd make her disappear. Her dog, I said. What happened to it? A Pitbull, yes. Named, I don't remember name. Elena lost him 3 years ago, right after those photographs. One day he was with her in mountains, next day gone. She searched for weeks, was heartbroken. She always believed someone took him to keep her silent. Loyal's whine had become a keening sound. He was on his feet now, pacing, agitated in a way I'd never seen. Mr. Rostov, Wolfe said, his voice gentle, unusual for him. Your sister's dog was named Loyal. We have him here. Silence on the line. Then Bože moj, God in heaven. You have him? He's alive? He is. He came to us through Jonathan Blackwood, who found him injured in New York State, approximately 6 months after your sister lost him. We acquired him after Blackwood's death last November. He is healthy, well cared for, and currently expressing significant distress at these photographs. Elena would be so happy, a sound like a sob. He was good dog. She loved him very much. Wolfe was watching Loyal with unusual attentiveness. Mr. Rostov, we will investigate your sister's death. However, I require complete cooperation from you, including all of her effects, her files, her correspondence, and access to her darkroom and home. Can you provide this? Yes, anything. But please, you must come here. The police chief, I don't trust him. There are powerful people in Frost Hollow, people with money who don't want trouble. I think they're protecting whoever did this. When did you discover these particular photographs? Yesterday, hidden in false bottom of her chemical storage box. She'd made second set of prints, kept them separate from negatives. The men in photos, I recognize them. One is Leonard Vickers, owns Cascade Industries in Concord. The other is his plant manager, name of Raymond Cutler. Both very rich, very connected. Wolfe closed his eyes, and I knew what was coming. The man hates leaving the brownstone. After the Blackwood case, he'd sworn never to venture into wilderness again, declaring that November expedition, sufficient suffering to last a lifetime. But Loyal was still pacing, whining, staring at the photographs. And Wolfe, despite his manifold eccentricities, is not immune to loyalty. especially from a dog who walked 200 miles to find help. Very well, Wolfe said, opening his eyes with the resignation of a condemned man. We will come to Frost Hollow. Archie, make arrangements. We leave tomorrow. After disconnecting, I stared at him. Sir, it's February. We're talking about the White Mountains in the dead of winter. Snow, ice, freezing temperatures. I am aware of what February entails, Archie. I am also aware that this dog was a witness to a crime 3 years ago, that his owner was murdered because of that crime, and that the murderers remain unpunished. We have a debt to discharge. To a dog. To loyalty itself. Prepare to leave at dawn. Take your winter coat, your gun, and your patience. We will need all three. I looked at Loyal, who had finally stopped pacing and was sitting before Wolfe's desk, his eyes locked on Wolfe's face with an intensity that was almost human. You're doing this for him, I said. I am doing this because it is necessary. The fact that it pleases the dog is incidental. But his hand moved to rest briefly on Loyal's head, and the dog's tail moved once, a thump of understanding. The fortress was preparing for exodus again. We departed Tuesday morning at 6 o'clock, before the sun had fully risen, in a caravan of 2 vehicles. I drove the Packard with Wolfe beside me, and 3 dogs, Caesar, Mars and Loyal, in the back seat. Saul Panzer followed in his Chevrolet with Fritz, the remaining 3 Dobermans, and enough supplies to sustain a small army through a siege. Wolfe had spent Monday afternoon in a fury of preparation, telephoning ahead to secure lodging, a bed and breakfast in Frost Hollow run by someone named Margaret Holloway, arranging for Theodore to mind the orchids with the severity of military command, and giving Fritz explicit instructions about which provisions to pack for what he called another assault on civilization by the primitive outdoors. The drive north was long and grey. We passed through Connecticut, into Massachusetts, and finally crossed into New Hampshire as winter landscape deepened around us. The farther north we went, the higher the snowbanks became, the more skeletal the trees, the more profound the sense of entering a world where humans were barely tolerated guests. Wolfe endured it in stoic silence, his eyes closed, his breathing measured. Occasionally he would open one eye to glare at a particularly scenic vista, as though personally offended by its existence. In the back seat, Caesar and Mars maintained their vigilant posture, while Loyal pressed his face to the window, watching the landscape with intense focus, as if recognizing terrain from memory. He knows where we're going, I observed. The animal has been here before. Memory is powerful, particularly for creatures who live primarily through instinct and sensation. You're talking about dogs, not clients, right? A grunt that might have been amusement. We stopped once for lunch at a roadside diner outside Concord, the capital city such as it was. While Wolfe consumed a sandwich that barely met his standards, and I walked the dogs in the snowy parking lot, Saul made telephone calls, gathering intelligence on Cascade Industries and its owner Leonard Vickers. When we reconvened in the vehicles, Saul reported, Cascade Industries is a mid-sized chemical manufacturing company, been in business 25 years, specializes in industrial solvents, cleaning compounds, chemical treatments, annual revenue around 12 million. Leonard Vickers inherited the company from his father, expanded it significantly. He's 62, married, 3 children, all involved in the business. On paper, the company has a clean record. No environmental violations, no lawsuits, no regulatory problems. Which means they're either scrupulous or skilled at concealment, Wolfe said. The latter, I suspect, because 3 years ago, there was a brief inquiry by the EPA about groundwater contamination near one of their disposal sites. The inquiry was dropped after Cascade provided documentation showing proper handling procedures. But the timing matches exactly with Elena Rostov's photographs. Someone was paid to look the other way, I suggested. Or intimidated into silence. The EPA inspector who closed the case transferred to Oregon 6 months later. I'm trying to reach him. We continued north. The afternoon light was fading when we finally turned onto Route 16 and followed signs for Frost Hollow. The town appeared suddenly, nestled in a valley between mountains that rose like fortress walls, stark, white, beautiful in the harsh way, winter beauty manifests. Frost Hollow was small, perhaps 800 people, with a main street that held a general store, a diner, a church, a combination town hall and police station, a gas station, and a dozen scattered businesses that looked like they survived on the edge of economy's knife. The buildings were old, Weathered, the kind that had stood for 100 years and would stand for 100 more if sheer stubbornness counted for anything. Margaret Holloway's bed and breakfast was at the north end of town, a sprawling Victorian house painted sage green with white trim, surrounded by pines heavy with snow. Smoke rose from 3 chimneys, and warm light glowed from every window, a welcoming sight after 7 hours on the road. Mrs. Holloway herself emerged before we'd fully parked. A woman of perhaps 70, short and round, with silver hair in a bun, and the kind of face that had smiled so often it had formed permanent laugh lines. She wore a thick wool cardigan and boots that looked capable of traversing glaciers. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, welcome, welcome. And oh my, you brought dogs. How wonderful. I love dogs." She approached the Packard fearlessly as I released Caesar, Mars, and Loyal. All 3 immediately went into assessment mode, but something about Mrs. Holloway's genuine warmth made them relax. Even Caesar, who trusts no one, allowed her to scratch his ears. "And this handsome fellow," she said, kneeling before Loyal. "This must be Elena's dog. Dimmitri told me you'd found him. She'd be so glad to know he's safe. Come in, all of you. I've prepared rooms and dinner's almost ready. You must be frozen." Inside, the house was everything the exterior promised. Warm, spacious, filled with antiques and quilts and the smell of baking bread. Mrs. Holloway showed us to our rooms on the 2nd floor, a large suite for Wolfe with reinforced bed frame. She'd anticipated his needs. A comfortable room for me, and arrangements for Fritz and Saul down the hall. The dogs would sleep with us, as always. After we'd settled in, Mrs. Holloway served dinner in the dining room. Roasted chicken, root vegetables, fresh bread and apple pie that made even Wolfe nod approval. We ate while she talked, and I quickly understood that Margaret Holloway was the town's unofficial historian, gossip and conscience. "Elena Rostov was a lovely girl," she said, refilling our coffee. "Came here 6 years ago from Boston, said she wanted to photograph the mountains. She was Russian, you know, or her parents were. Quiet, serious, spent all her time in the woods with her camera. People liked her, though some thought she was odd living alone, talking to animals, always watching and documenting. But she was kind, and that counts for more than conformity." "Her death," Wolfe said. "The official determination." Mrs. Holloway's expression darkened. "Accidental fall. Chief Brennan closed the case in 3 days. Said she was hiking alone, lost her footing, fell into Devil's Gorge. But that's nonsense. Elena knew those trails better than the chief knows his own office. And there's more." "Tell us." 2 days before she died, she came here for tea. We were friends, you see. She was frightened. Said someone had been following her, watching her house. Said she'd found old photographs that proved something terrible. And she was going to the state police, not the local ones. She didn't trust Chief Brennan. "Why not?" Mrs. Holloway leaned in, her voice dropping. "Because Leonard Vickers owns half this town, including the chief's salary. Vickers donates to the police equipment fund, sponsors the annual town picnic, gives Christmas bonuses to the officers. When Cascade Industries needs something from the town, the chief makes sure it happens. It's not corruption exactly, more like dependency. The town needs Cascade, and Cascade needs cooperation. A symbiotic relationship that breeds complicity," Wolfe observed. "Exactly. So when Elena turned up dead investigating Cascade, and the chief closed the case immediately, well, people talked. Not loudly, because Vickers has long ears, but they talked. After dinner, Nero Rostov arrived. He was a lean man in his 40s with dark hair, tired eyes, and the bearing of someone carrying unbearable weight. He embraced Mrs. Holloway, then turned to us. "Mr. Wolfe, thank you for coming. May I see him? May I see Loyal?" The Pitbull had been lying by the fireplace with the other dogs. When Dimmitri spoke his name, Loyal's head came up, his ears forward. The man knelt, and Loyal approached slowly, sniffing, assessing. Then recognition hit. You could see it in the way the dog's whole body relaxed, his tail beginning to wag, his face pressing into Dimitri's hands. "Zdravstvуй, starый drug," Dimmitri murmured in Russian. "Hello, old friend. You remember me?" "You knew him before?" I asked. "I visited Elena many times. Loyal was always with her, her shadow. I helped search when he disappeared, walked miles calling his name. Elena never forgave herself for losing him." He looked up at Wolfe, tears on his face. "She would want me to thank you for caring for him." "The debt runs in the opposite direction," Wolfe said quietly. He found us when we needed finding, but we're here to discuss your sister's murder, not sentiment. Show us everything." We convened in Elena Rostov's house an hour later, a small cottage at the edge of town, backing onto national forest. It was a photographer's dwelling, cameras on every surface, lenses in careful array, walls covered with stunning black and white images of wilderness, wildlife, the raw beauty of the White Mountains in all seasons. But the dark room was where the story lived. It occupied what had once been a pantry off the kitchen, windowless and sealed, with proper ventilation and plumbing for chemical processing. Red safety lights cast everything in crimson glow. Dimmitri showed us the false bottom in the chemical storage box where he'd found the photographs we'd received. "But there's more," he said, reaching behind a shelf of developer bottles. He extracted a small fireproof box, opened it with a key from his pocket, and laid out its contents on the work table: negatives in protective sleeves, a ledger with dates and locations, and a letter in Elena's handwriting. Wolfe examined the negatives while I read the letter aloud. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. 3 years ago, I witnessed a crime. I was photographing near Little Bear Creek in the National Forest watershed when I stumbled on men dumping chemical barrels. My dog Loyal and I hid and watched. I took photographs, evidence of illegal disposal in protected area. The men saw me leaving. They followed me for days. They came to my house, threatened me. They said if I reported what I'd seen, they would kill Loyal. They meant it. I could see it in their eyes. So I hid the negatives and stayed silent, but they didn't trust me. One morning, Loyal was gone. I searched everywhere. I think they took him, either to hurt me or to make sure I stayed scared. It worked. For 3 years I kept silent, but 2 weeks ago, someone called me. No identification. Said they knew about the photographs, knew I still had them, said I had to turn over all evidence or accidents happen. When I said the evidence was already destroyed, they laughed, said they'd be watching. I'm taking this to the state police, but if something happens before I can, these negatives prove everything. Who dumped the chemicals? Where? When? The watershed is contaminated. People's wells draw from that aquifer. They're poisoning the town to save disposal costs. Find Loyal if you can. He was good dog. He deserved better than being caught in human corruption. Elena Rostov. The room was silent except for the hum of the ventilation fan. Dimmitri was crying quietly. Loyal had pressed against his leg, offering the comfort dogs give when humans grieve. Wolfe set down the negatives. These constitute evidence of federal crimes: illegal dumping in protected watershed, environmental contamination, possible endangerment of public health. Combined with the letter, they also establish motive for murder. But Chief Brennan won't do anything, Dimmitri said bitterly. I showed him some of Elena's concerns before she died. He said she was paranoid, that Cascade Industries was respectable, that I was grief-stricken and imagining things. Then we bypass local authority entirely. Archie, in the morning, you will drive to the state police barracks and present this evidence to whoever commands the Criminal Investigation Division. Simultaneously, Saul will contact the EPA's Criminal Enforcement Office and the FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit. We will create pressure from multiple directions. And in the meantime, I asked, in the meantime, we examine the scene of her death and determine how a photographer who knew the mountains intimately came to fall into a gorge she'd certainly photographed a dozen times. The police have closed the case, Dimmitri said. They won't give you access. A cold smile touched Wolfe's lips. The police needn't know we're investigating. Archie, tomorrow you and Saul will visit Devil's Gorge. Take the dogs, take cameras, document everything. If Elena Rostov was murdered, the evidence remains. Snow preserves what heat destroys. Back at the bed and breakfast, I found Wolfe in his room, sitting in a reinforced chair by the window, staring out at the mountain darkness. The 6 dogs were arranged around him, Caesar at his feet, Mars by the door, Apollo at the window, Minerva on the rug, Diana on the bed, and Loyal lying across the threshold, as if guarding against invisible threats. You're thinking about Blackwood, I said. I'm thinking about people who die alone in beautiful places, because they valued truth over safety. Jonathan Blackwood wrote about corruption and paid with his life. Elena Rostov photographed it and paid with hers. The mechanisms differ, but the fundamental equation remains constant: Truth is dangerous to those who profit from lies. And Loyal. Loyal survived both deaths and found his way to us. Against probability, against logic, against every reasonable expectation that merits consideration. You mean it merits justice? I mean it merits completion. The dog witnessed crimes that killed 2 people he loved. We will ensure those crimes are answered for. Outside, snow had begun to fall, thick, heavy flakes that promised accumulation. The mountains were invisible in the darkness, but their presence was palpable, ancient masses of stone and ice that had watched human folly for millennia and would watch for millennia more. Somewhere in that darkness was Devil's Gorge, where Elena Rostov had died. Tomorrow we would learn why. Wednesday morning broke cold and crystalline, the sky that particular shade of blue that only comes after heavy snow. 8 inches had fallen overnight, and the world was transformed, every edge softened, every surface brilliant, every sound muffled by winter's white blanket. After breakfast, Mrs. Holloway's pancakes, which even Wolfe admitted were adequately prepared, Saul and I prepared for the hike to Devil's Gorge, while Wolfe remained at the bed and breakfast with Fritz and the tactical maps Dimmitri had provided. The plan: Saul and I would examine the death site, photographing and documenting everything, while Wolfe would interview locals who might provide context. I dressed in layers, thermal underwear, wool pants, flannel shirt, down jacket, waterproof shell, boots rated for 30 below, gloves, hat, scarf, my .38 revolver in a shoulder holster under the jacket, extra ammunition in my pocket, camera, binoculars, evidence collection kit, flashlight, rope, first aid supplies. Saul prepared similarly, and we divided the dogs. Caesar, Apollo and Loyal would come with us. Mars, Minerva and Diana would stay with Wolfe. Dimmitri met us at Elena's house to serve as guide. The trail to Devil's Gorge is 3 miles, mostly uphill. In summer, it's moderate difficulty. In this snow, it's challenging. Are you prepared? We'll manage, I said. There's another thing. Leonard Vickers owns property adjacent to the National Forest. His family compound is 2 miles east of the gorge. His security patrols the boundaries. If they see you, they'll ask questions. We're hikers exploring the mountains. Nothing suspicious about that. In February, after a major snowfall? With dogs? Dimmitri looked skeptical. Be careful. These people have no tolerance for interference. We started from a trailhead behind Elena's property, following markers into the National Forest. The going was difficult. Deep snow, hidden obstacles, upward grade, but the dogs managed easily, their strength and 4-point stability advantage, giving them confidence where humans struggled. Loyal led the way, moving with purpose, as if following a trail only he could sense. Caesar and Apollo flanked us protectively, alert for threats. Above, bare trees clawed at the blue sky, and the silence was profound, the kind of wilderness quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. After an hour, we reached a saddle between peaks, where the trail forked. Loyal took the left branch without hesitation, and we followed. The path narrowed, running along the side of a steep slope, then opened onto a promontory overlooking a deep chasm. Devil's Gorge. It was a geological scar perhaps 200 feet deep and 50 feet wide, its walls vertical, rock faces where nothing grew. At the bottom, a frozen stream glittered like a ribbon of cracked glass. The gorge ran for maybe half a mile before disappearing into forest, a permanent wound in the mountain's flesh. She fell from here, Dimmitri said, pointing to a section of the trail 20 feet ahead. That's where they found her scarf caught on a branch. Said she slipped on ice, went over the edge. I approached carefully, studying the ground. 8 inches of fresh snow covered whatever evidence might have existed, but the geography was instructive. The trail here was perhaps 4 feet wide, with a rock wall on one side and the gorge on the other. A person walking carefully, even in winter, would have room to navigate safely. Where exactly was the scarf? Saul asked. Why? Dimmitri pointed to a stunted pine growing from the rock wall, its branches hanging over the trail, caught there about head high. I examined the tree. Its branches were indeed at head height, which meant Elena would have been moving toward the gorge, not away from it, when her scarf came off. That made no sense. People moving along a trail stay on the safe side, not the edge, unless they were pushed. Loyal was investigating the trail with intense focus, nose to the ground, moving in a grid pattern. Caesar and Apollo had positioned themselves at the approaches to the promontory, creating a security perimeter. After a moment, Loyal stopped at a spot 10 feet from the gorge's edge and began digging, his powerful paws throwing snow aside. What has he found? Saul wondered. We joined him. Beneath the fresh snow was older, denser snow that had partially melted and refrozen, ice layers from previous weather cycles, and embedded in that ice, barely visible, was a dark stain. I photographed it, then carefully extracted a sample with my knife, placing it in an evidence bag. Could be blood. Hard to tell with the ice, but if it is, and if it's Elena's, then this is where she fell, or was pushed. Saul was examining the rock wall. Archie, look at this. At shoulder height, carved into the rock face with crude precision, were symbols, a triangle, a circle, and what looked like initials, CI. Cascade Industries, I said. Someone marked this as their territory. Or marked it as a warning, Saul suggested. This trail overlooks the watershed where the dumping occurred. From here, a photographer could see down into the valley where Cascade was operating. Elena took her photographs from somewhere near this position. I looked down into the gorge, trying to imagine the fall, 200 feet of empty air, then impact on frozen rocks. Survivable? Not likely, but confirming the cause of death would require the coroner's report, which Chief Brennan had in his possession and probably wouldn't share. We spent another hour documenting everything: the trail conditions, the bloodstain, the carved symbols, the sight lines to the valley below, the approach routes. Loyal led us 50 yards down the trail to a second location where he indicated intense interest, another spot with disturbed snow patterns, and what might have been boot prints, now mostly obscured by the fresh snowfall. 2 people, Saul said, studying the patterns. One smaller, probably Elena, one larger. They stood here together, or confronted each other, then moved toward the promontory. She was walking with someone she knew, I reconstructed, or was forced to walk at gunpoint. They reached the promontory. There was a struggle, hence the bloodstain, and she went over, or jumped rather than face whatever alternative was offered. A grim thought, but possible. As we prepared to leave, movement caught my eye. A figure on the opposite side of the gorge, perhaps 300 yards away, watching us through binoculars. I raised my own binoculars for a closer look. A man in expensive outdoor gear, standing beside a snowmobile, his attention fixed on our position. We've been spotted, I told Saul. The man lowered his binoculars and reached for something at his belt, a radio, probably. He spoke briefly, then mounted the snowmobile and departed, heading east toward what Dimmitri had identified as Vickers' compound. They know we're here, Saul said. That's unfortunate. That's inevitable. Come on, let's get back before we have company we don't want. The return hike was faster, gravity assisting. The dogs moved with disciplined urgency, sensing our concern. We reached Elena's house without incident. But as we loaded into Saul's car, a police vehicle pulled up behind us, a frost-hollow cruiser with Chief Brennan at the wheel. He climbed out slowly, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with a red face and suspicious eyes. His uniform was crisp despite the weather, his boots polished to mirror shine. Everything about him suggested a man who cared deeply about appearances and very little about substance. "Gentlemen," he said in a voice like gravel in a mixer, "I'm Chief Wesley Brennan. I understand you're from New York, hear about Elena Rostov. I'd like to know what you were doing up at Devil's Gorge just now." "Hiking," I said pleasantly. "Beautiful day for it." "Uh-huh. With 3 trained dogs and professional camera equipment. That's some serious hiking." His eyes moved to Loyal. "That's Elena's dog, the one that went missing 3 years ago. How'd you come by him?" "Long story involving a different case. He's ours now." "See, that's interesting. Because Mr. Vickers, he owns Cascade Industries, called me about 20 minutes ago, said his security spotted trespassers up near the gorge, tampering with an active death investigation site. That's a crime, gentlemen." "The investigation is closed," Saul pointed out. "You ruled it accidental. There's no active investigation to tamper with." Brennan's face darkened. "Don't get smart with me. I know who you are. Nero Wolfe's people come up here thinking you'll play detective. Well, this isn't New York City. Up here I'm the law, And I'm telling you, stay away from Devil's Gorge, stay away from Cascade Industries, and stay away from anything connected to Elena Rostov's death. Am I clear? As mountaineer, I said, we're just tourists, Chief, enjoying the scenery. Tourists who happen to be investigating a closed case. I wasn't born yesterday, Goodwin. You want to operate in my jurisdiction. You'll need cooperation, and you won't get it. He climbed back into his cruiser and drove off, leaving us standing in the snow. Saul watched him go. That was a warning and a threat. That was confirmation, I corrected. He's protecting Vickers, which means he's complicit. Whatever happened to Elena Rostov, the local police aren't going to help us solve it. Then we solve it without them. Back at the bed and breakfast, we found Wolfe in the parlor, surrounded by maps and reports, with Fritz bringing him beer on schedule despite the wilderness setting. The 3 dogs who'd stayed with him were arranged in watchful positions, and Mars had apparently taken an instant dislike to the mounted deer head over the fireplace, spending the morning growling at it. I reported our findings: the blood stain, the carved symbols, the boot prints, the watcher from Vickers's compound, and our encounter with Chief Brennan. Wolfe listened with eyes closed, his fingers steepled. When I finished, he said, "The pattern is clear. Elena Rostov discovered illegal dumping 3 years ago, was threatened into silence, lost her dog as punishment. Recently, something changed. Either new dumping operations or someone learned she still had evidence. She was warned, refused to comply, and was murdered in a way designed to appear accidental. The local authorities, compromised by financial dependence on Cascade Industries, closed the investigation immediately. Now that we're here asking questions, they're attempting to intimidate us into departure. Will we depart? I asked, knowing the answer. We will solve the murder, expose the dumping operation, and ensure the perpetrators face federal charges. In that order." He opened his eyes. "Has Saul contacted the state police?" "I did," Saul confirmed. "I have an appointment tomorrow morning with Lieutenant Grace Kellerman, head of the Criminal Investigation Division, at the Concord Barracks. I'll present all evidence we've gathered." "And the EPA?" I reached Agent Mark Hollister in their Criminal Enforcement Office. He's interested but wants corroboration of the dumping before opening an investigation. The photographs help, but he'd prefer site confirmation. Then we provided. "Tonight," I stared at him. "Sir?" "Tonight after dark, you and Saul will visit the watershed site where the photographs were taken. You will document current conditions, collect samples if possible, and confirm whether dumping has continued. Loyal will accompany you. He knows the location. That's trespassing on Vickers's property. That's gathering evidence of federal crimes, which justifies reasonable intrusion. However, I recommend caution. People who murder photographers are unlikely to welcome investigators. Which is why I'm bringing Caesar and Apollo as well," I said. 3 dogs, 2 armed men, and the element of surprise. Plus darkness, Saul added. "The moon is waxing, should provide adequate light with minimal flashlight use." Wolfe nodded. "Fritz will prepare hot food for your return. Mrs. Holloway has agreed to provide lodging for as long as necessary, and I've arranged for Theodore to remain in New York indefinitely, managing the orchids. We are committed." That evening, while Frost Hollow settled into winter darkness, Saul and I prepared for what might charitably be called industrial espionage, or less charitably called breaking and entering. We dressed in dark clothing, checked our weapons, and tested our radio equipment. The 3 dogs, Caesar, Apollo, and Loyal, seemed to sense the mission's gravity, their usual playfulness replaced by focused intensity. At midnight, with the town asleep and the moon risen, we drove to the edge of the national forest, parked Saul's car in a concealed pull-off, and began the trek into darkness. The forest at night in winter is a place of absolute silence and profound beauty. Our breath frosted in the air. The snow beneath our boots made the softest crunch. Above, stars blazed with the intensity possible only far from city lights. Loyal led again, moving with confidence through terrain he'd navigated years ago. We followed, trusting his memory, our eyes gradually adjusting to moonlight, reflected off snow, enough to navigate without flashlights. After 40 minutes, Loyal stopped and dropped into a crouch. We froze. Ahead through the trees, lights were visible, security lights mounted on poles, illuminating an area that had been cleared of forest. We advanced slowly, using trees for cover, until we reached a vantage point overlooking the site. What we saw made my blood run cold. The clearing was perhaps 2 acres, carved from national forest in violation of every federal land use regulation. Security lights mounted on temporary poles cast harsh illumination over a scene of systematic environmental crime. 20-foot shipping containers lined one-edge offices or storage probably. A large excavator sat dormant near a pit that had been dug into the frozen earth. Stacked beside the pit were industrial barrels, dozens of them, the same type visible in Elena's photographs, and scattered across the site were signs of recent activity, tire tracks, boot prints, cigarette butts, and a portable generator, humming softly. But the damning evidence was the pit itself. Using binoculars, I could see that it was perhaps 20 feet deep and filled with barrels in various states of decay. Some were intact, others had split open, their contents leaking into the soil, dark stains spreading through frozen earth like a poison flower blooming. Saul was photographing everything with a camera equipped for low-light work, the shutter clicking softly. I was documenting with my own camera, trying to capture the scale and scope of the operation. Loyal had frozen, his body rigid, a low growl building in his chest. Caesar and Apollo flanked us, alert and tense. "This is ongoing," Saul whispered. "Fresh tracks, running generator, recent excavation. They're still dumping here." 3 years later, they haven't stopped, which means the contamination is far worse than Elena's original photographs showed. I was taking photos of the barrel markings, zooming in on labels that identified the contents: industrial solvents, chlorinated compounds, heavy metal solutions, all toxic, all illegal to dispose of except at permitted hazardous waste facilities. A sound cut through the night, an engine, approaching from the east. We dropped flat, pulling the dogs down with us. 2 snowmobiles appeared, carrying men in security uniforms, Cascade Industries logos visible on their jackets. They stopped near the containers, and both men dismounted. One pulled out a thermos, while the other lit a cigarette. "Told Vickers about the detectives," one was saying, his voice carrying in the cold air. "He's pissed. Wants to know who sent them. Same people who sent that photographer, probably. Should have done a better job with her." My hand moved toward my gun, but Saul's grip on my arm stopped me. "We needed information, not confrontation. Cutler says if they keep poking around, we handle them the same way. Make it look like an accident. City people come up here, not prepared for winter, lots of ways to die in mountains." "What about the dog?" "They got her dog with them. Vickers says kill the dog too if necessary. Can't leave witnesses, not after what happened last time." Last time, meaning Loyal witnessing the original dumping, 3 years ago. "When's the next dump scheduled?" "Tomorrow night. Big load from the Concord plant, about 40 barrels. Boss wants it buried before that state cop comes sniffing around. They'll find it eventually. By then the evidence will be contaminated beyond use. That's the point. Can't prove what you can't test." They finished their break and remounted the snowmobiles, conducting a perimeter check before departing back toward the compound. We waited 10 minutes after their lights disappeared, then moved. "We need samples," I said. "Soil, water if there's any, and photographs of those barrel markings." We worked quickly, collecting evidence in the bags I'd brought, photographing everything from multiple angles, documenting the pit's dimensions and the barrel's condition. Loyal led us to the creek that ran through the site, the same stream visible in Elena's photographs. Even frozen, I could see the discoloration in the ice, the chemical sheen that suggested contamination. I broke through the ice and filled a sample bottle with water from beneath. The smell hit immediately, chemical, sharp, wrong. "This watershed feeds the town's water supply," Saul said quietly. "How many people are drinking this?" "Too many." We were finishing documentation when Loyal's head snapped up, his ears forward, his body tense. A warning. Caesar and Apollo moved immediately to flanking positions, their hackles raised. Saul and I dropped into cover behind a pile of barrels, weapons drawn. 3 snowmobiles appeared from the direction of the compound, their headlights sweeping the clearing. The same security guards from earlier, plus a third man, larger, older, wearing a heavy coat with a fur collar. They stopped in the center of the clearing, and the large man dismounted, pulling off his helmet. Even from a distance I recognized him from Elena's photographs, Leonard Vickers himself. "I know you're out there," he called into the darkness, his voice carrying authority and menace. Saw your tracks leading in, and my dogs picked up your scent. This is private property. You're trespassing on an active industrial site. Come out now, and we can discuss this like civilized people. Stay hidden, and my security team will assume you're a threat and act accordingly." Neither Saul nor I moved. Bluffing or genuine detection? Hard to tell. But 3 armed men with snowmobiles and local knowledge versus 2 investigators on foot in darkness, the odds weren't favorable for confrontation. "You're Wolfe's people," Vickers continued. "I know that. Chief Brennan told me. You're investigating Elena Rostov's death, which the police have already ruled accidental. You're also trespassing and tampering with private business operations. That's actionable, both criminally and civilly." He paused, scanning the darkness. "But I'm a reasonable man. Leave now, go back to New York, and we'll forget this happened. Stay, keep investigating, and I guarantee you'll regret it. This isn't the city. Things happen in the mountains. People disappear. Am I making myself clear?" One of the security guards had drawn a weapon, a rifle, from the silhouette. The other was scanning with a thermal imaging device, sweeping the tree line. "Thermal's picking up something," the guard said. "Northeast quadrant, about 60 yards. They started toward our position. Decision time. We couldn't outrun snowmobiles, and a firefight with potentially superior numbers wasn't appealing. But we also couldn't let them confiscate the evidence we'd gathered. I made a choice. Loyal, I whispered, pointing back the way we'd come. Go. Run. Find Wolfe. The Pitbull looked at me with those intelligent brown eyes, hesitated 1 second, then turned and vanished into the darkness, moving with the silence of a wolf. Caesar and Apollo, I kept with us. They were protection, not messengers. The guards were 20 yards away when I stood up, hands visible, Saul doing the same. "Enough," I called. "We're leaving. No need for anyone to get excited." Vickers approached, flanked by his security. Up close, he was a man in his early 60s, well-fed, expensively dressed, with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His eyes were cold and calculating. "Archie Goodwin," he said. "Not a question. Nero Wolfe's assistant, and Saul Panzer. I did my homework after Brennan called. You work for a famous detective, which means you think you're clever." "Clever enough to document federal environmental crimes," I replied. "Illegal dumping in a national forest watershed, contamination of public water supplies, falsification of disposal records. The EPA will be very interested." "The EPA has no jurisdiction without evidence, and you've gathered no evidence because this is a legitimate disposal site with all proper permits and authorizations. Anything you think you found will be inadmissible because you obtained it through criminal trespass." "Fruit of the poisoned tree," Saul murmured. "He's not wrong about admissibility." "But he's worried," I countered, "which means the evidence exists and matters. Otherwise he wouldn't be here in person, making threats." Vickers smiled, an expression without warmth. "Not threats, advice. Elena Rostov was a talented photographer, but she was naive about business realities. She thought documenting alleged environmental issues would change things. Instead, it got her killed." "You're confessing?" I asked. "I'm stating facts. She fell into Devil's Gorge after hiking alone in winter conditions. Tragic accident. Just like it'll be tragic when 2 detectives from New York venture into the wilderness, unprepared, and something unfortunate happens." One of the guards raised his rifle slightly. "Want us to handle it now, boss?" Vickers considered, then shook his head. "No, too messy. Besides, we don't know what they've already reported or who they've told. Better to let them leave than ensure their evidence is discredited and their credibility destroyed. I have lawyers for that." He gestured to the guards. "Escort them to the forest boundary. Make sure they understand. They're not welcome on my property. They're not welcome in Frost Hollow, and if I see them again, I won't be this generous." We were marched at gunpoint back through the forest, a humiliating 40-minute trek with Caesar and Apollo walking beside us, tense but disciplined. At the forest boundary where Saul's car was parked, the guards finally lowered their weapons. "Go home," one said. "Nothing for you here but trouble." They waited until we'd driven away, before disappearing back into the darkness. "In the car," Saul said. "Well, that was unpleasant, but informative. Vickers is scared. He's covering up murder and environmental crimes, and he knows we know. which means he'll either try to silence us or discredit us. Probably both. The evidence we collected? I patted my jacket. Still have it. Sample bottles, photographs on the camera's memory card, notes. He was too confident to check, assumed we'd cooperate once confronted. And loyal? Following his nose back to Wolfe, carrying the most important evidence of all, his memory. That dog witnessed this 3 years ago, and now he's witnessed it again. He's the continuity between past crime and present crime. Back at the bed and breakfast, we found Wolfe awake, ensconced in the parlor with Fritz, drinking beer and reading. Loyal was lying at his feet, having arrived 20 minutes before us. All 6 dogs were present now, creating a furry perimeter of security. I reported everything, the dumping site, the confrontation, Vickers' threats. Wolfe listened, then said, "You were reckless but successful. We now have confirmation of ongoing criminal activity, samples for laboratory analysis, photographs documenting the operation, and recorded threats from the principals. Tomorrow Saul delivers everything to the state police and the EPA. They will take jurisdiction from local authorities. Vickers will fight back," I warned. "Let him. Fighting requires exposure. Once federal agencies are investigating, his political connections and local influence become irrelevant. The law may be slow, but applied correctly, it's inexorable. And in the meantime, we're targets. He as much as admitted having Elena killed. Then we exercise caution. Fritz will remain here with the dogs, maintaining security. Saul will be at the state police barracks. You and I will visit the morgue." I blinked. The morgue. Elena Rostov's body. The coroner's report may be falsified, but bodies don't lie. I wish to examine her injuries and determine whether they're consistent with an accidental fall or a forced one. Chief Brennan will never allow it. Chief Brennan won't know. I've already spoken with Mrs. Holloway, who knows the county coroner, a Dr. Patricia Novak, who is apparently a friend of Elena's and suspicious about the official ruling. She's willing to grant us access quietly, after hours, without informing local police. You've been busy. I've been thorough. The difference matters. Thursday afternoon, Wolfe and I drove to the county morgue in Lancaster, 20 miles north of Frost Hollow. Dr. Patricia Novak met us at the back entrance, a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair, sharp eyes, and the demeanor of someone who'd seen every way humans could die and maintained her humanity anyway. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, I shouldn't be doing this. If Brennan finds out, he'll make trouble." "Then we'll be discreet," Wolfe assured her. "My interest is purely investigative. I need to know whether Elena Rostov's injuries are consistent with the official narrative." She led us through sterile corridors to the examination room, where Elena's body waited under a sheet. Dr. Novak pulled it back with professional efficiency, revealing a woman who'd been perhaps 40, fit, with the weathered skin of someone who spent most of her life outdoors. The injuries were extensive: multiple fractures, severe head trauma, internal damage consistent with a 200-foot fall onto rocks. But Wolfe was focused on specific details, examining her hands, her skull, her back. "These defensive wounds," he said, indicating bruises on her forearms, "they predate the fall." By several hours, Dr. Novak confirmed. I noted that in my report, but Brennan dismissed it, said she probably banged into things while hiking. "These bruises are consistent with someone grabbing her arms forcefully, restraint marks, and this contusion on her temple. What caused it? Blunt force trauma. Could be from striking a rock during the fall. Could be. What's the alternative?" Dr. Novak hesitated, then said quietly, "Could be from being struck before the fall. If someone hit her, knocked her semi-conscious, then threw her into the gorge, the subsequent injuries would mask the original assault." Wolfe examined the skull fracture. The primary impact point, the fatal injury, is here, at the back of the skull, consistent with landing face up, which suggests she was falling backward. People don't fall backward off cliffs unless pushed. That's what I thought. But I'm a county coroner in a small town. I can't contradict the police chief without evidence stronger than medical opinion. He has political backing. I have a salary that depends on staying employed. "You have integrity," Wolfe corrected, "which is rarer and more valuable. Will you provide a revised report stating your medical opinion that the injuries are consistent with homicide? If you can guarantee the state police will protect me from retaliation, yes. Elena was my friend. She deserves justice. She will receive it. Archie, photograph the body's injuries, close-ups of the defensive wounds, the temple contusion, the skull fracture pattern. Dr. Novak, I need a complete set of photographs from your autopsy documentation, along with your revised report and any notes from the original examination. She provided everything, along with toxicology results, showing Elena had been sober and drug-free, eliminating the possibility she'd been impaired when she fell. As we were leaving, Dr. Novak said, "There's one more thing. 2 days before Elena died, she came to see me. We were friends, had coffee together sometimes. She was frightened, said someone had been following her, watching her house. She showed me a death threat." A threat? Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Written? A note, left on her car windshield. It said, "Silence is survival, talking is death. Choose wisely." She'd reported it to Chief Brennan, who told her it was probably a prank, but she knew better. She said if anything happened to her, I should tell investigators about the note. Did she still have it? I don't know. Maybe in her house. Back in the car, I said. We need to search Elena's cottage thoroughly. That note is evidence of premeditation. Dimmitri has given us access. Tonight we search. But first I need beer, dinner and contemplation. This case has layers, and I'm dissecting them methodically. That evening at the bed and breakfast, while Fritz prepared dinner, beef stew, somehow made magnificent despite limited equipment, Saul returned from the state police barracks with news. Lieutenant Kellerman is taking the case seriously. She's opening an investigation into Elena's death based on our evidence, and she's contacted the EPA about the dumping site. They're coordinating a multi-agency response, state police, EPA, FBI Environmental Crimes Unit. Vickers is about to face federal scrutiny. His reaction will be predictable, Wolfe said. Denied, legal challenges, attempts to suppress evidence, but with multiple agencies involved, his local influence is neutralized. There's more. Kellerman ran background on Raymond Cutler, Vickers' plant manager, the other man in Elena's photographs. Turns out he has a criminal record: assault, reckless endangerment, illegal weapons possession. He did 2 years in state prison 10 years ago. He's the likely enforcer. Meaning he's the one who physically killed Elena, I said. Or arranged it. Kellerman wants to interview him, but he's disappeared. Left his apartment in Concord 3 days ago. Hasn't been seen since. Running, Wolfe concluded, which suggests guilt and fear. Find Cutler, and we find our murderer. After dinner, Saul, the dogs and I returned to Elena's cottage for a thorough search. We worked systematically. Kitchen, living room, bedroom, darkroom, even the small attic and crawl space. Loyal supervised, moving from room to room, occasionally stopping to sniff particular spots where Elena's presence lingered. It was Diana, our smallest, quickest Doberman, who found the death threat note. She'd been investigating the bedroom, and something about the closet interested her. She pawed at the baseboard, whining softly. I examined where she'd indicated, and discovered the baseboard was loose. Behind it, in a small cavity, was a waterproof pouch containing the note Dr. Novak had mentioned, along with 3 more threatening messages, all undated but clearly recent. The first, silence is survival, talking is death, choose wisely. The second, we know where you live, we know what you have, give us the negatives, or we'll take them from your corpse. The third, last warning, tomorrow you die unless you comply. No police, no tricks, or everyone you love dies too. The fourth and final, too late, you should have listened. 4 escalating threats, culminating in a promise of death. Elena had hidden them carefully, creating evidence trail in case she didn't survive. She knew, Saul said quietly. She knew they were coming for her, and she documented it all. We also found her will, simple document leaving her photographic equipment to Dimmitri and requesting that Loyal be placed with someone who will value loyalty as I did. A note was attached. If you found this, I'm dead. The men who killed me work for Leonard Vickers and Cascade Industries. They're poisoning the town's water to save disposal costs. Don't let them get away with it. And please, if you find Loyal, tell him I never stopped looking for him. He was the best friend I ever had. Back at the bed and breakfast, I laid out the evidence before Wolfe. The threat notes, the will, Elena's final message. He read them slowly, his expression darkening. This woman faced death with courage and foresight. She documented her threats, hid evidence strategically, prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. And when they killed her, she left a trail clear enough that even local police incompetence couldn't entirely obscure it. Except Brennan did obscure it. He closed the case immediately, ignored evidence and protected the killers, for which he will face consequences. I've asked Lieutenant Kellerman to investigate Brennan's finances. I suspect we'll find deposits from Cascade Industries or Vickers personally. Corruption this blatant usually leaves trails. Fritz entered with beer, setting the tray down carefully. "Sir, there's someone at the door. A man says he needs to speak with you urgently. He won't give his name, but he seems frightened." "Then admit him. Frightened people often bring useful information." The man who entered was in his late 30s, dressed in work clothes, his face drawn with exhaustion and fear. He looked around nervously, his eyes fixing on the dogs with obvious unease. "Mr. Wolfe? I'm Danny Carter. I worked for Cascade Industries. I'm the night foreman at their disposal facility." "Sit," Wolfe commanded. "Fritz, bring coffee. Mr. Carter, you're safe here. The dogs are protective but not aggressive unless threatened. Now why have you come?" Carter sat, his hands shaking. "Because I can't do this anymore. Because Elena Rostov was a good person, and they killed her for telling the truth. Because I've been dumping toxic waste in that watershed for 3 years, and I know it's wrong, and I'm tired of lying about it." "You wish to confess?" "I wish to testify. Against Vickers, against Cutler, against all of them. But I need protection. They'll kill me like they killed Elena if they find out I'm talking." "Why come to me rather than the police?" "Because Chief Brennan is in Vickers's pocket, and because Mrs. Holloway told me you were investigating, that you cared about finding the truth. I got nowhere else to turn." Wolfe studied him. "Tell me everything. Start with the dumping operations and end with Elena Rostov's death." Carter talked for an hour, laying out the entire conspiracy. Cascade Industries had been illegally disposing of hazardous waste for over a decade, burying barrels in the national forest to avoid legitimate disposal costs. They'd been caught once by the EPA, 3 years ago, but Vickers bribed the inspector to close the investigation. When Elena photographed the operation, Vickers panicked. He sent Cutler and security to threaten her. When she didn't give up the negatives, they stole her dog to punish her. "Loyal didn't run away," Carter said, looking at the Pitbull. "They took him, drove him 100 miles away, and dumped him in the woods to die. They thought he'd starve or get killed by wildlife. They didn't know he'd walk all the way to New York to find help." My throat tightened. Loyal had walked 200 miles not because he was lost, but because he'd been deliberately abandoned, left to die as punishment for his owner's witness. "And recently," Wolfe prompted, "why did Vickers decide to kill Elena now?" "Because we started a new dumping operation last month, bigger than before. Elena somehow found out, called Vickers directly, told him she still had evidence and was going to federal authorities. He tried to buy her silence, offering money. She refused, so he sent Cutler. Cutler killed her personally. He and another security guard guy named Marcus Webb. They followed her up to Devil's Gorge, confronted her on the trail. She tried to run, so they grabbed her. She fought, and Cutler hit her with a flashlight, stunning her. Then they threw her into the gorge and called it an accident. Chief Brennan was paid to make the investigation go away." "How much was Brennan paid?" $20,000. I know because I was there when Vickers wrote the check, made out to consulting services, but everyone knew what it was for." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Will you repeat all of this under oath to state authorities?" "Yes, if they'll protect me and my family. I got a wife, 2 kids. I can't let them get hurt because I did the right thing. They will be protected. Archie, call Lieutenant Kellerman. Mr. Carter is now a witness under state protection. Arrange for his transfer to secure location immediately." Within 2 hours, state police arrived to collect Carter. Lieutenant Kellerman herself came, a sharp woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone who'd fought for authority and earned it. She took Carter's statement, arranged his protective custody, and then turned to Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe, you've handed us a federal environmental crime case, a murder case, and a police corruption case, all documented and ready for prosecution. We'll move fast. Arrest warrants for Vickers, Cutler, Webb, and Brennan by tomorrow. EPA is raiding the dumping site at dawn with hazmat teams. This is going to be big. Make certain it's thorough, Wolfe said. Elena Rostov died for this. Her evidence and Carter's testimony must be unassailable. They will be. Thank you for your work. Most detectives would have walked away when the local police shut them out. You didn't. After she left, I said to Wolfe, "That's it then. Case solved. The bad guys are getting arrested. Justice is served, and we can go home." Almost, Wolfe corrected. One element remains unresolved. What? What? He looked at Loyal, who was lying at his feet, eyes closed but ears alert. The dog's journey. We know now that he was taken from Elena, driven far away, and abandoned to die. But he didn't die. He walked 200 miles, survived winter, crossed mountains, and found his way to our door, to a man he'd never met, in a city he'd never been to. How did he know where to find me? I knelt beside Loyal, scratching his ears. Maybe he didn't know, maybe he was just walking, and we happened to be there. You don't believe that any more than I do. Jonathan Blackwood wrote about me in his essays. Elena Rostov was a photographer who might have known Blackwood's work. Perhaps she spoke of me to her dog, or perhaps the dog simply understood that justice required Nero Wolfe. However it happened, he found us, and we owed him this resolution. Loyal's tail thumped once against the floor. Acknowledgement or appreciation, impossible to say. But his eyes, when he looked at Wolfe, held something like peace. Outside, snow was falling again, but this time it felt like cleansing rather than burial. Friday morning brought the storm, not of snow, but of law enforcement. At dawn, 3 black SUVs carrying EPA agents in hazmat suits, accompanied by state police, descended on the watershed dumping site. By 7 a.m., they documented over 200 barrels of toxic waste, collected soil and water samples showing contamination levels that violated federal environmental laws by factors of 100, and photographed evidence of ongoing illegal disposal operations. By 8 a.m., arrest warrants were executed. Raymond Cutler was found at a hunting cabin in Vermont, attempting to flee the state. State police arrested him without incident, though he initially claimed diplomatic immunity, a nonsensical defense that suggested panic. Marcus Webb, the security guard who'd helped throw Elena into the Gorge, was arrested at his home in Frost Hollow. He immediately requested a lawyer and refused to speak. Chief Wesley Brennan was arrested at his office, in front of his deputies, on charges of accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, and being an accessory after the fact to murder. His protests that he'd just been doing business with local employers fell on unsympathetic ears. And Leonard Vickers was arrested at his compound, his lawyers present but helpless to prevent it. The charges read like a criminal greatest hits compilation: conspiracy to commit murder, illegal disposal of hazardous waste, violation of the Clean Water Act, bribery of public officials, and racketeering. By noon, all 4 were in state custody, awaiting arraignment. We watched it unfold from Mrs. Holloway's parlor, monitoring news reports and receiving updates from Lieutenant Kellerman. The story had exploded. Media descended on Frost Hollow like wolves on wounded prey. Environmental crimes lead to murder, screamed headlines. Photographer died exposing toxic dumping. Police chief arrested in cover-up. Dimmitri Rostov called at 1 o'clock, his voice thick with emotion. They arrested them, all of them. Elena will have justice. She will, Wolfe confirmed, and her evidence will ensure convictions. Your sister's courage will be remembered. What about Loyal? Will you, can I? He couldn't finish the question. I understood what he was asking. Loyal had been Elena's dog before becoming ours. Did Dimmitri want him back? Did we have to give him up? Wolfe looked at the Pitbull, who was lying in his customary position between the office area and the door, peaceful and secure. Mr. Rostov, Loyal chose us. He walked 200 miles to find help, and he found it. He's bonded to our household now, to our pack. Would you force him to leave where he's chosen to stay? Silence on the line. Then, no. No, I wouldn't. Elena would want him happy, not returned like property. If he's happy with you, then that's where he belongs. But could I visit him sometimes? I'd like him to remember Elena, to know she loved him. You're welcome at our brownstone whenever you wish to visit, Wolfe said, which for him was a remarkable concession. The dog will remember, and you will ensure he does. After the call, I said, that was generous. That was practical. The dog has suffered enough displacement. He's settled, secure, part of our structure. Uprooting him again would be cruel. You like him? I accused. I respect his loyalty and value his presence. That's not the same as liking, which is an emotional response beneath my dignity. But his hand rested on Loyal's head as he said it, and the dog's tail thumped against the floor. That afternoon, we visited Devil's Gorge one final time. Wolfe, myself, Dimmitri, Mrs. Holloway, and all 6 dogs. Dr. Novak joined us, along with a local minister named Father Thomas, who'd known Elena. At the promontory where Elena had died, Father Thomas conducted a brief memorial service. He spoke of Elena's passion for truth, her dedication to protecting the natural world, and her courage in standing against powerful corruption. Dimmitri read from her journals, passages about the beauty of the mountains, the importance of witnessing, the responsibility to speak when silence would be easier. She died doing what she believed was right, Dimmitri said, his voice breaking. And because of her, the water will be cleaned, the guilty will be punished, and other people's children won't be poisoned. That matters. Her life mattered. Mrs. Holloway placed flowers at the edge of the gorge, wildflowers preserved from summer, bright against the snow. Elena loved these mountains. She saw God in them, she said, saw truth in the way nature doesn't lie or compromise. I hope she's at peace. Wolfe, who'd been silent throughout, said quietly, she saw clearly and acted courageously. That's as close to grace as humans achieve. May her example endure. Loyal stood at the edge, looking down into the gorge where his first person had died, his body rigid with emotion dogs feel but cannot name. After a moment, he howled, one long mournful note that echoed off the rocks and carried through the forest like a prayer. The other 5 dogs joined him, their voices rising together in a canine requiem that needed no words to convey grief, respect, and farewell. When they finished, the mountains were silent again, as if they'd heard and accepted the offering. We left Frost Hollow Sunday morning, our mission complete. The arrests had held, all 4 defendants remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk and severity of charges. The EPA had begun the long process of cleaning up the contaminated watershed, and the State Attorney General had announced a comprehensive investigation into Cascade Industries' operations statewide. Mrs. Holloway prepared a farewell breakfast that would have sustained us for a week, hugging each of us as we prepared to depart. You brought justice here, she said to Wolfe. That's rare and precious. Thank you. Thank Elena Rostov, he replied. We merely finished what she started. Dimmitri met us as we loaded the vehicles, kneeling to embrace Loyal one final time. Be good, Starry Drug, he whispered in Russian. Be happy. Remember Elena, but don't be sad. She'd want you to have a good life. The Pitbull licked his face, understanding or instinct, who can say, and then returned to the Packard, ready to go home. The drive south was quiet. The dogs slept, exhausted from days of activity. Wolfe dozed, his bulk settled into the seat with the relaxation of a man satisfied with completed work. I drove, thinking about Elena Rostov and Jonathan Blackwood, 2 people who'd died for truth, whose deaths had brought justice not despite, but because of their courage. We reached Manhattan Sunday evening as the sun set, painting the city in gold and shadow. The brownstone at 918 West 35th Street rose before us like a beacon, its bulletproof windows reflecting the dying light, its fortress solidity welcoming us home. Theodore met us at the door, breathless with orchid news. Mr. Wolfe. The Miltenia had a slight fungal. Tomorrow, Theodore, Wolfe said, moving past him with the determination of a man seeking his chair. Tonight, I wish only for my desk, my beer, and the absence of mountains. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Fritz had arrived ahead of us, and already had dinner preparations underway. The smell of roasting meat filled the brownstone. The dogs flowed to their customary positions. Caesar near Wolfe's desk, Mars by the safe, Apollo at the window, Minerva by the fireplace, Diana in the red leather chair. And Loyal, after one circuit of the office to confirm everything was in order, lay down on the Persian rug between my desk and the hall door. His spot, his choice, his home. I settled at my desk, sorting through the mail that had accumulated during our absence. Bills, correspondence, a check from a recent client, and a letter. Heavy paper, expensive stationery, postmarked from Concord, New Hampshire, dated before we'd left for Frost Hollow. I opened it carefully. Mr. Wolfe, my name is Elena Rostov. You don't know me, but I know your work. Jonathan Blackwood wrote about you in his essays, said you were a man who valued truth above convenience and justice above peace. He said, if someone needed help solving impossible problems, you were the man to find. I have an impossible problem. 3 years ago, I witnessed a crime. I photographed it, but I was too afraid to report it. They took my dog to punish me, to keep me silent. I thought I could live with silence, but I can't. Now someone is threatening me, demanding I turn over my evidence. I'm going to the authorities, but I'm afraid I won't live long enough to testify. So I'm sending you this letter, and I'm sending copies of my photographs to a safety deposit box in Boston, with instructions to mail them to you if anything happens to me. If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. Please find who killed me. Please make them pay. And if you ever find my dog, his name is Loyal, please tell him I never stopped loving him and I never stopped looking. With hope, Elena Rostov. The letter was dated 8 days before her death. She'd known, she'd prepared, she'd reached out to the one man she believed could help, even if that help came too late to save her. I showed the letter to Wolfe. He read it slowly, then set it down. She knew Jonathan Blackwood's work, knew he'd written about me, trusted that connection enough to reach out in her final days. He looked at Loyal, and the dog fulfilled her instructions perfectly. He brought us into her case, led us to her evidence, and witnessed justice served. She asked us to tell him she never stopped loving him. I said, how do we do that? Wolfe considered, then said, Loyal, come here. The Pitbull rose and approached Wolfe's desk, sitting at attention. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle, a tone he reserves for rare moments of genuine emotion. Your first person, Elena Rostov, sent this letter. In it, she said, to tell you she never stopped loving you, never stopped looking for you. She died trying to do the right thing, and because of her courage, justice was done. You should know that. You should remember her as someone worthy of the loyalty you gave her. Loyal's tail moved slowly, a thoughtful wag, as if processing words he couldn't fully understand but could feel were important. Wolfe's hand settled on the dog's head. You've had 2 good people love you, and 2 good people die. That's a harder life than most dogs endure. But you're here now, safe, part of this household, protected by 5 companions and 2 humans who value what you represent. Elena would be glad of that. The tail wagged faster, understanding perhaps, or simply happiness at Wolfe's tone. After Loyal returned to his rug, I said, you know, most dogs just chase squirrels and sleep on couches. Ours solve murders. Ours are exceptional, as was necessary, given the humans they protect. That evening we dined in civilization, Fritz's roast duck with cherry sauce, proper wine, vegetables that hadn't been frozen, and dessert that made the wilderness diet seem prehistoric. The dogs ate in the kitchen, their bowls arranged in careful hierarchy, their meals proportioned to perfection. After dinner, settled in the office with beer and books, Wolfe said, 2 cases, 2 people named Blackwood, 2 wilderness deaths, 1 dog connecting both. The probability of random coincidence is minimal. You think there's a connection between Jonathan and Elena beyond the dog? I think Jonathan Blackwood was a writer who documented truth, and Elena Rostov was a photographer who documented truth, and both died for it. Loyal witnessed both deaths and survived both. That's not coincidence. That's pattern. What kind of pattern? The kind that suggests truth-tellers find each other, even across geography and circumstance. And when they die, their witnesses carry forward the mission. Loyal carried Jonathan's mission to us, and through us, solved Elena's murder. The pattern completes. That's almost poetic, and unlike you. Wilderness induces temporary philosophy. It will pass. But he was smiling slightly, and his hand moved to rest on Loyal's head as the Pitbull dozed beside his chair. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its endless energy, sirens, traffic, humanity in constant motion. Inside, the brownstone was peaceful, secure, a fortress of reason in a chaotic world. And on the Persian rug, a brick-red Pitbull with a white chest blaze, and 1 notched ear slept the deep sleep of the safe and home. His 200-mile journey finally, completely ended. 3 months later, on a warm May afternoon, Dimmitri Rostov visited the brownstone. He brought photographs, Elena's work, selected from her archives, images of the White Mountains in all seasons, of wildlife captured in moments of unself-conscious grace, of forests and streams, and the raw beauty that had defined her life. "I'm publishing a book of her photographs," he told us over lunch in the dining room. "The proceeds will fund an environmental protection foundation in her name. I wanted you to have this." He handed Wolfe a leather-bound portfolio containing a series of photographs Elena had taken 3 years ago. Before the dumping, before the threats, before everything went wrong. The images showed Loyal, younger, healthier, happy, running through snow, investigating frozen streams, sitting alert on mountain trails. And one final photograph, Elena herself, reflected in a window, her camera visible, and beside her, Loyal's profile as he watched something outside the frame. "She loved that dog more than anything," Dimmitri said. "When she lost him, part of her died. The rest died on Devil's Gorge. But seeing him now, with you, knowing he's safe and valued, that would make her happy. Thank you for giving him a home." "He earned his place here," Wolfe replied, as did Elena Rostov, whose courage will be remembered. After Dimmitri left, I hung Elena's photographs in the front room, where afternoon light would catch them. Images of wilderness and loyalty, art and witness, preserved in silver and gelatin. Loyal sat before them for a long time, studying the pictures of his younger self, his first person, a life that seemed distant now, but was documented forever. "Do dogs remember?" I asked Wolfe. "They remember what matters. Loyalty, love, loss. The rest is instinct and habit. But what matters, that endures." That evening, Inspector Kramer visited. He'd heard about the New Hampshire case, wanted details, grumbled about detectives who can't stay in their jurisdiction while clearly being impressed. The 6 dogs greeted him with their customary recognition, Caesar and Mars allowing him to pass, Apollo watching from the window, Minerva assessing from the rug, Diana circling once in greeting, and Loyal approaching to sniff his hand before returning to his spot. "That's the Pitbull from the first case," Kramer said. "Blackwood's dog. He's filled out, looks healthy." "He's thrived," Wolfe confirmed, "and recently helped solve his previous owner's murder. The dog has been remarkably productive. Most dogs just bark and shed. Yours solve federal crimes. Quality over quantity," I suggested. After Kramer left, the brownstone settled into its evening rhythm. Fritz cleaned the kitchen, the dogs made their final patrols, and Wolfe retreated to his book while I balanced our accounts. But before sleeping, I walked to the front hall where Loyal's brass collar tag still hung on its hook, the tag that had brought him to us last November, that had led us to Jonathan Blackwood's cabin, that had started his journey to becoming one of ours. Loyal, if found, return to J. Blackwood, Hunter's Rest Cabin, Crooked Creek, NY. The tag represented only the second chapter of Loyal's life, Jonathan Blackwood's brief time with him, but not the first chapter with Elena, or the third with us. 2 owners dead, both murdered for telling truth, and 1 dog who'd survived both losses and found his way to justice each time. I left the tag on its hook. It belonged there now, a memorial to Jonathan Blackwood, a reminder of how Loyal came to us, and evidence of the loyalty that gave him his name long before Blackwood ever found him. Loyal didn't need it anymore. He wore a new collar now, handmade by Fritz, with his name tooled into the leather and a small brass plate engraved with our brownstone address. Because he wasn't Jonathan Blackwood's dog anymore, or Elena Rostov's, he was ours, and we were his. Upstairs, Wolfe was probably reading. In the kitchen, Fritz was probably preparing tomorrow's menu. In the office, 6 dogs were probably arranged in their sleeping positions, each in their chosen spot. And on the Persian rug, a brick-red Pitbull who'd had 2 owners die for truth, who'd walked 200 miles to find help, who'd witnessed and solved 2 murders, slept peacefully. His journey was over. His home was here. And as Wolfe had said, what matters endures. For Elena Rostov, who photographed truth. For Jonathan Blackwood, who wrote it. For Loyal, who witnessed both. And for those who believe justice delayed is not justice denied,